If you believe that a child cannot handle the reality that a grandmother is very ill in the hospital, then you don't need to tell them that, in my opinion, because you have to protect your children's hearts, minds, souls, spirits, and you ideally, moms and dads know their kids well enough to know what they can handle.
I don't know if you guys deal with this too, but when I take my kids to the hospital and they ask if it's going to hurt, sometimes I tell them it is. I don't know if that's good, but I also wrestle with should I tell them that it's not going to hurt when I really don't know, or it really might actually hurt because they're going to get a shot that day? Wrestling through this can really put parents in a dark place. Do we sometimes tell our kids white lies just to get them to do the thing? Or should we be honest with them? Does that build resilience? Dr. Kathy has some important insights for us. And so let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
Dr. Kathy, in a guest essay titled, "There's One Lie I Will Never Tell My Children," it's something that was published in the New York Times, Alison Sweetgrant writes about her childhood experiences with surgery and chronic pain and how they inform her belief in telling her own children the truth. She says, quote, "Parents who claim to never lie to their children are liars. It begins with Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, and then it's, yes, all kindergartners go to bed before 7 o'clock, and no, the chickens on the farm and the chicken on your plate are not the same chicken." And she goes on to say, most of these untruths are harmless. They're white lies, and we call them that. But there are some lies we tell as parents, however well intentioned, that do more harm than good. Parents are myopic, she says. They're trying to make their kids feel better in the moment without considering how lying to them will affect them in the future. They may fall victim to wishful thinking. Maybe it won't be as bad as I think it will be. They're trying to make themselves feel better because it doesn't just hurt to see your child in pain, it hurts to feel responsible for it too. End quote. But I want to ask you about this. What do you think about this topic? Should we kind of tell some white lies or kind of allow some of this to happen? Or maybe do we withhold truths from our kids when we're kind of talking to them to help them not have to weigh out and wrestle with some of the harsh realities of the world? What do you think about that?
Let me start by saying that lying is a sin, when it's intentional, when it's chosen to manipulate, to get our way, to bias, to, deceive, it is wrong. Um, it is also true that there are times when children are not able to handle the truth. And Wayne, we've talked often on the podcast here and there about developmentally ready kids, right? We've talked often about whether or not children are developmentally ready for certain things. If you believe that a child cannot handle the reality that a grandmother is very ill in the hospital, then you don't need to tell them that, in my opinion, because you have to protect your children's hearts, minds, souls, spirits, and you ideally, moms and dads know their kids well enough to know what they can handle. A lot of parents have said that it is awkward when they believed in Santa and Santa's fake, and then, well, I believe in Jesus. And is Jesus fake? I can't see him either. And so there are parents who have said, I'm not going to lie for fear that they will then not believe me when it comes to other things. One of the examples I use when I'm teaching parents is how many of you have said to your kid on the way to the dentist or the doctor, no, really, it won't hurt. And you do that to get them in the door, right? It's kind of like when you take a dog to the vet, you never say vet out loud. We're gonna go to the dog park, and you just accidentally turn the corner and end up in a different parking lot. So again, we have to be wise. This is a parent issue, right? I'm not gonna tell any parent what to do here. I think you think about it. I think you're on the same page if you're married, and maybe you even handle your own kids differently. You've got 8. You maybe don't even handle all 8 the same because, again, maybe one kid at age 14 can handle something and another kid at age 14 can't. So, do we think and are we thoughtful? Are we considerate? Do we have the big picture in mind? All those things need to be we need to wrestle with it all. It's tough. I didn't ask you to bring this topic to the podcast, actually.
You actually didn't know, and I just said we're
No.
gonna bring this to the podcast because I'm wondering right now, because I think that sometimes, like she says, it could end up impacting resiliency because kids get, maybe tricked to think that something, like you said, it's not gonna hurt when we go to the doctor. But is there something to be said about walking your kids through the reality that it is gonna hurt, but
Yes.
sometimes hurt is okay. Or, it is okay to be afraid of, going to the vet with your dog, but sometimes it's okay to acknowledge that fear. So I wonder a little bit, do we walk through this a little bit understanding that we're gonna position the truth in a way that supports resiliency, but doesn't foster fear? What do you think about some of that, Dr. Kathy?
I love the way you worded that. Absolutely. We teach here at the ministry that the Bible is true, and the Bible is right, and God's ways and God's wills win. And he teaches us through James and Romans that it's in the struggle that we grow up. It's when we walk through difficult experiences well, or the outcome is good, that we develop a better character to handle the next thing differently. And we develop a greater faith in the God of the Bible because we watched him show up. Like, if you pretend everything is easy, then your kid doesn't pray for strength, and then your kid doesn't learn that God provides it. I recently had some blood drawn, just a regular check on my thyroid, and as I was waiting in the waiting room for the blood appointment, out walked a little boy with his mom, and he was holding the biggest teddy bear I think I've ever seen. And that was a smart mom. "You gotta go get some blood, son. Take the teddy bear." It's okay to comfort them, and it's okay to say, "Look what you did. Man, it may not be easy, but you are strong." And to the believer, we would say, pray for that strength. And then at the end, hey, how did God meet your need today? Mommy, it wasn't bad as I thought it was going to be. And the doctor, that person who with the needle, he was nice and he distracted me. And he said he was going to be careful. And mommy, I think he was. Like, you can have those conversations when you're honest with your kids.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I agree with that 100%. I think that you do walk your kids through that, and then you tell them that they're building muscles, they're becoming stronger. I think that sometimes, though, even as parents, we might not want to tell our kids or walk our kids through the truth of some of the hard things that we've maybe experienced ourselves, some of the challenges or struggles that we've had. And it can be at a place where we don't want to talk about things that maybe make them worried. Like, I'll use an example. Some days I kind of wake up in the morning and I think, man, I don't feel like we have enough money. Like, I think I might need to get like a fifth job or something. Like, we kind of just think about that, right? Like, there's some realities. I kind of get nervous about that. I get nervous when your mom kind of isn't feeling well because I start to think about what would happen to her, right? And I want to, kind of ask this: is it helpful for us? Not that we share these, challenges or struggles with our kids to let them know that there are fearful things in the world, but is it helpful for our kids that we talk about the things that we're even afraid of, or maybe some lies that we kind of want to keep telling ourselves, it'll be okay, and we just kind of wish these hard things away from us? Do we need to also face the challenges and struggles in our lives with our kids? And what does that do when we share some of those challenges and struggles ourselves?
Again, carefully and developmentally appropriately do we share with our kids. If they're gonna be freaked out, if you've already got a child who's anxious, prone to a depressed state, then maybe they don't need to know certain details. However, you and I would both say, but if they don't experience more details, they won't learn that they can in fact handle them. And who's the best person to challenge them to step up to even more? The mom and the dad who know the kids better than anybody else. So, challenges and struggles, I think they are inspiring. What have we overcome? Where do we see God show up? And, the value of community. One of the things that I've recently, I've been community minded my whole life because of the way that my brother and I were raised. But I'll tell you, Wayne, and you know this, in the last month, my community, man, so valuable. Just stepping up, the number of text messages, the number of requests for, "Hey, Kathy, can we meet?" Because there were people who cared about, stuff, and it was so rich. If kids don't know that there's a struggle in the family or a challenge that a dad is going through, then they can't even be part of that community, part of that blessing where they choose to be more obedient that day so dad doesn't get a worse of a headache or whatever. So yeah, challenges and struggles, they inspire kids to step up, to believe in the goodness of God, to become the hero of their own story, to fight and defend. You're not gonna pick on my grandma. She's slow walking because she's old. Leave her alone, you can't do that if you haven't been told that it's an issue, and I hope that makes sense. This is a tricky topic, but, I love that we're talking about it, and I'm gonna say, Wayne, and you can add to this if you want, I think if someone's listening and They're really questioning. I think that means that maybe change is on the horizon. Like, if we've said something that's got you thinking, then please keep thinking. When we're done, keep thinking. Because I would say that, maybe God brought this episode to you today because maybe you're overprotecting. And when you overprotect kids, they become fragile and they're afraid of every challenge, even challenges that they should be able to master at their age. So I love that we're here, and I hope that you'll take seriously the thinking that you're doing right now.
I really like that Dr. Kathy leaned into this question that I had, and it reminded me as we were talking of a passage that comes out of Joshua chapter 9, and I'll begin reading at verse 14. The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. And then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. This story comes after the Israelites have conquered Jericho and Ai. The Gibeonites, fearful of destruction, tricked Joshua and the Israelites into making a peace treaty. They disguised themselves as travelers from a distant land, wearing old clothes and carrying moldy bread. Without seeking God's counsel, Joshua believed their lie and made a covenant with them. When the deception was uncovered, Israel had to honor the treaty, but the Gibeonites were placed in permanent servitude. This story really reveals the importance of seeking wisdom and discernment without making decisions. I think it's really helpful for our kids to understand that deception exists in the world, that sometimes people don't tell the truth. And instead of shielding them, we should teach them to think wisely and assess situations. Truths strengthen them. Even though Israel was tricked, God used the situation for his purpose, showing that even when we are deceived, God's plan remains intact. Which I think it goes to the point of what Dr. Kathy talked about today, that oftentimes we have to wrestle through these things with if we should tell our kids the full truth of the story, that some of that actually is on a case-by-case basis or even a kid-by-kid basis. But there is something that we can drive every kid to, and that's that they can have courage and confidence in what God has called them into. So if you lean into that with your kid that is facing a doctor's appointment that is probably going to hurt a little bit, tell them that God has equipped them for that moment. And if you're wrestling with how to tell your son that their favorite pet died, sometimes understanding their emotional maturity can really be helpful, not just for that moment, but also helpful to help them understand that mom and dad really love and care for me, and they're going to walk me through hard things. These are no easy matters, but we wanted to bring it up just to help guide you in some conversations, to help you think well in this moment. God's called you into it. He's equipped you as parents. Just that fact that you're stepping into darkness can really be a bright light that does shine and cut through the darkness that your kids might be facing today. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. We're so glad you joined us this week, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.